Hi there, friends. It's Monday, February 10th. My guest today is the co-creator of The Daily Show, comedian and longtime activist of Abortion Access Front. It's Lizz Winstead joining me today, and the conversation begins at about 33 minutes in today. But first, I've got your headlines, your clips, and your good stuff. So let's get started. Kick this week off, shall we? I hope you had a great weekend. Did you watch the big game last night? Congratulations to our friends in Philadelphia and the Philadelphia Eagles, and sorry to all of our friends in Kansas City, wherever that is. The Chiefs unfortunately lost and did not win the three-peat because they had won before, I guess, 2 times. There were commercials, Brad Pitt brought us together, and everything is so much better now. So I hope that you enjoyed the game, and if you didn't, I hope you enjoyed whatever you did and your weekend. I will be hosting a hangout tonight, but I think I'm going to start it a little bit later, maybe at 9 p.m., because I've got an Indivisible meeting that I'm attending in my town around 7 p.m. for at least an hour. So plan to start at 9 p.m., but look for that email. If I can get here earlier, I will. This, of course, is a daily show, and I appreciate your support. Patreon.com/PeteDominic. Join us in Las Vegas for PODJAM at the end of March. Tickets are available now. But speaking of now, it's time to get to today's good stuff, where every day I try to find some happiness, some hope, some inspiration, maybe some humor to get your day started, to get the show started before I get to these scary headlines, news, and often what we learn in the interview. But I am here to fight apathy and to learn along with you, and one of the things I love to do is the good stuff. So here it is from Dan Harris, a clip from his show, 10% Happier, and the subject is operating from love versus fear. Dan is talking about New Year's resolutions and creating bad habits and quitting good habits, and his guest is a smart guy named Dr. Rangan Chatterjee, very influential doctor in the UK, huge podcaster, best-selling author, and an influential guy. So I like this. I'll take this advice.
Intrinsic motivation, that can make an abiding long-term habit.
I completely agree, Dan. And every single behavior in our life either comes from the energy of love or the energy of fear. I believe a lot of New Year's resolutions are coming from an energy of fear. What do I mean by that? I don't feel good enough. I don't look good enough. I'm a loser. I need to overcome basically how I feel about myself with these lifestyle choices that I'm now going to make. But the underlying energy is one of fear. I don't like who I am. So these lifestyle choices then try and camouflage that and trying to overcome that. But actually, when your energy is one of love, that actually, you know what, I like the person I am, actually, and I want to do the best for who I am. I want to be the best human being that I can, so I can be present with my children and my partner, so I can be a really good work colleague. It's a very different relationship with myself, and so the behavior now sticks.
Ah, that's a pretty interesting way of looking at things. I wonder how that made you feel and think. All right, here's another person who makes you feel and think. Her name is Mel Robbins. You've probably heard of her YouTube, her podcast, her books, kind of a motivational speaker as well. But she's got this kind of interesting personality and hard edge. They're all recycling old ideas, as am I, but repackaging them in ways that I think communicate, land better with us in today's life, society, culture that we live in. Well, I wouldn't maybe normally play her stuff. I don't know. I'm not that familiar with her. I have no judgment of her. I'm just always skeptical of people who make a living specifically in this kind of lane. But I'm going to play her because she was on with my work husband, my life partner, David Campbell, who is the anchor of Today Extra down in Australia, in Sydney, on their Today Show, their national morning television show. And he is my best friend, and he had Mel Robbins on, and I thought I'd play a clip from their conversation, because that I'll do. They're talking about her new book, which is called The Let Them Theory. And I'm not sure why there's music under this clip, but it's like one of those morning show things, you know?
Tell us about the Let Them Theory.
So the Let Them Theory is a mindset tool that shows you immediately what's not in your control and what's in your control. And the way that you use it is super simple. If you ever feel frustrated or stressed out or annoyed or hurt or bothered or worried, just say the words "let them," and you're going to notice that other people's behaviors and opinions constantly stress you out. And when you say let them, you are detaching from the one thing in life you'll never be able to control, which is other people. And then you say, let me, and this is the most important part of the theory, let me remind myself only 3 things I can control. What I think about this, what I do or don't do, and what I do in response to my feelings.
So that sounds great when you say it, because you are Mel Robbins and you are an incredible person and human and guru. But for a lot of us humans, we get caught up in our day-to-day, don't we? It can grind us down. It's a cost of living crisis. It's getting the kids to all their sports activities. My mom needs help for something and she's on the phone all the time. How do I detach and let them, so I can then drill onto the let me part?
I learned absolutely everything by screwing up my own life. And then everything that I share is an attempt to help other people not make the same mistakes I'm making. So the point is this. In life, there are always things you're going to have to manage. You've got kids, you're married, you have a job, you want to stay employed. And you need your time and energy and focus to be able to show up for the people and the things in your life that are important to you. But you raise a really powerful thing, which is we live in a moment of time where the world is designed to steal your joy, your focus, and attention.
Right.
From the headlines that make you scared to all of the changes with AI to somebody in your family struggling with a health crisis, all those things are out of your control. They're already happening. Let them. And allowing my mom to stress me out, I got to let her be her and stop expecting her to be any different. She's been the same for 70 years, for crying out loud. Why do you expect her to be any different? Let her be who she is.
There you go. How about it? Try that out. Let Them. That's the name of her new book, which I just apparently did an advertisement for. It was more about my buddy Campbell and his conversation with her. But I like that. Mel Robbins on Today Extra down there in Sydney with David Campbell. How did I do? Okay. Well, that is today's good stuff. That's what I brought for you. Hope you appreciate it. Now it's time to get to the stuff that's not as good, the bad stuff, headlines and clips. Knowing that these are aberrations, these are exceptions, that's why they're news. Most things are good. Most people are good, doing infinite love and kindness every day. Just your daily reminder. What have I got for you? Well, first of all, our disgraced criminal president, speaking to reporters on Air Force One yesterday, said he planned on announcing a 25% tariff on all steel and aluminum imports into the United States today. So that's a big deal. Not as big a deal, but still a big announcement. He also tweeted yesterday after the game, apparently, after the Super Bowl, which he left a little bit earlier because the team wasn't winning or for whatever reason. Anyway, he said he's going to tell the Treasury Department to stop minting new pennies, citing the cost of the rising cost of the producing of the 1 cent coin. So our great savior has saved us. It's so important to finally end the penny. We can all agree on that, right? Huh? Because who needs pennies or money at all, right? Soon we won't even need it. And it's going to be thanks to our great president, who has, by the way, a pretty high approval rating, but so did Joe Biden in his first month. It was similar, so don't get too thrown by that, much less the cheering that he got at the Super Bowl. It seems like a lot of people like what he is doing so far, but they haven't seen what he's done so far, and the consequences are coming. Okay, well, let's get to some other headlines. The vice president declared yesterday that judges aren't allowed to control the executive's legitimate power, delivering what he thinks is a warning shot, and I guess it is, to the federal judiciary in the face of court rulings that have, for now, stymied aspects of President Trump's agenda. The reaction to that by constitutional scholars and others is pretty swift and opposing to Vice President J.D. Vance. But we will wait to see if they defy a court order. That's the big deal that folks are looking for. That's a game changer, of course. And his budget director, this cartoon villain, Russ Vought, who is the architect of Project 2025, yesterday he announced they're going to eliminate the Consumer Financial Protection Act by starving the agency of funding. Quote, I have notified the Federal Reserve that the CFPB will not be taking its next draw of unappropriated funding because it's not reasonably necessary to carry out its duties. Before he'd made that announcement, Elon Musk had posted on X, "RIP CFPD," with a grave headstone emoji. CFPD's website was also taken down. Of course, the CFPB was very important and was created by Congress in 2011 as a financial industry watchdog, so only Congress can legally shut it down completely, but its director can freeze most of its actions by halting enforcement, weakening or repealing regulations, and softening its supervision of banks and other lenders, because why would banks need supervision? I mean, if you have a really short memory, then I guess you understand or had no idea about banks' role in the global financial crisis of 2008. Senator Chris Van Hollen said, "This is the richest man on earth bragging about destroying an agency that returned billions of dollars to working Americans who were cheated by big corporations." Well, guess what? The CFPB is protected by law and will fight to ensure it can continue to fight for consumers. So a lot of big reaction to that. Apparently, Elizabeth Warren and others are going to head over to the Treasury to make a big stinking announcement today. We'll look for that. A federal judge yesterday barred the U.S. government from sending 3 detained Venezuelan men to the Navy base at Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, according to a lawyer for the migrants. More than 200,000 protesters rallied in Munich, Germany, in the meantime, on Saturday against far-right extremism ahead of country's general election. I saw that maybe it was 300,000 protesters. That's a lot of people at a protest. The far-right anti-immigrant Alternative for Germany, or AfD, is in second place in recent polls, prompted widespread protests across the country before voters cast their ballots in a couple of weeks. Well, on February 23rd, apparently, is that election. Moving on, what else do I have for you? A new analysis by an independent automotive blog, which is getting a lot of attention, suggests that fire fatalities are 17 times more likely in a Cybertruck than in the infamous Ford Pinto, which was apparently the poster child of deadly cars. I thought it was just the poster child for douchebags, if there ever was one. But apparently, yeah, this new analysis by automotive blog Fuel Arc says that the Cybertrucks are very dangerous. Don't get a Cybertruck or get in a Cybertruck, because it means you have no real friends to speak of anyway. I wonder if any listeners right now have a Cybertruck. If you do, I'll give you my number and you can call me and we'll do a whole interview about it and your choices in life. Well, Bloomberg reports that Elon Musk is also critical of the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, targeted that organization for possible elimination as well. Because who needs that? Who needs NOAA to provide daily weather forecasts through the National Weather Service? The agency cooperates with others around the world, from exchange of satellite data to the coordination of aircraft that track hurricanes. NOAA is considered the world leader in weather forecasting. UCLA climate scientist Daniel Swain says, "Weather does not respect political boundaries. It is not possible to predict the weather in the United States without cooperation from other parts of the world." NOAA's chief scientist, a guy named Craig McLean, says it's a circus. He was the chief scientist during the Trump administration, the first one. He says it's a circus. If Trump's goal is to destabilize, humiliate, and embarrass the loyal people who have chosen to work for their country and federal government, he is succeeding. Bloomberg writes, NOAA employs more than 12,000 people across an array of labs and forecasting offices nationwide, watching everything from fish supplies in the ocean to atmosphere of the sun. The agency's research and observational data are the bones that support and protect billions of dollars of global markets, industry, and real estate. It is even armed, uniformed service of about 330 officers to fly its planes and sail its ships. So, yeah, that seems like a pretty bad agency to shut down, but we'll see what happens with that. Speaking of shutting down asylum claims for everyone else on Earth, President Trump issued an executive order to prioritize white people from South Africa to flee persecution to the U.S. So everybody else has their asylum claims shut down, except for white people from South Africa. Well, the executive order reads, the U.S. shall not provide aid or assistance to South Africa. The U.S. shall promote the resettlement of Afrikaner refugees escaping government-sponsored race-based discrimination. The order then says the Secretary of State shall prioritize admission and resettlement through the U.S. Refugee Admissions Program for Afrikaners in South Africa. Not all white people, though. Only the Dutch-German Afrikaners. It might shock you to learn that Elon Musk was the first one who pitched this idea to Donald Trump. But the Associated Press reports that Afrikaners aren't interested. Dirk Herman, CEO of the Afrikaner Trade Union Solidarity, which represents 2 million people, said, our members work here and want to stay here, and they are going to stay here. We are committed to build a future here. We are not going anywhere. The CEO of the Afrikaner lobby group, Afra Forum, said, we have to state categorically, we don't want to move elsewhere. And South Africa's foreign ministry said, it's ironic that the executive order makes provision for refugee status in the U.S. for a group in South Africa that remains amongst the most economically privileged, while vulnerable people in the U.S. from other parts of the world are being deported and denied asylum despite real hardship. And spokesperson for South Africa's president said South Africa is a constitutional democracy. We value all South Africans, black and white. The assertion that Afrikaners face arbitrary deprivation and therefore need to flee the country of their birth is an assertion devoid of all truth. So they didn't even ask for this. But that was a big controversy yesterday that I think went undercovered, and so I wanted to mention that. Also, and finally, I thought this was good news, so want to read it here at the headlines. 2 rare black wolves, likely siblings, were spotted on camera crossing a stream in a Polish forest. Conservation organization said yesterday. The unusual sighting captured last year on a video camera set up by a conservation organization, giving hopes to scientists studying these wolves and learning more about their genetics. But I like it. I thought it was symbolic and awesome. So there you have it. Those are the headlines I've gathered for you from the weekend. I'm sure I missed plenty. You can always email me your ideas, things that are going undercovered or need more discussion. standupwithpete@gmail.com is my email address. Now let's get to the clips that I've got for you from the weekend. And nobody does it better on a daily basis on a podcast than me right here at Stand Up, producing all of it myself. So thank you for your support. Tell your friends if they want the best, most comprehensive news update every day by around 6 or 7 a.m. lately, that come here and check out my daily podcast. All right, what do I have? Let's start with a clip that does have President Trump on it. Rarely do I play his voice. It's so triggering and upsetting and misleading. But he has repeated over and over that he wants to make Canada a state. I've talked about this with Dean Blundell last week, which is a great conversation people loved. I talked about it with Ophira Eisenberg, who's also a Canadian, American, dual citizen. And I want to hear from more Canadians. Of course, we've heard from Carlo and others up there in Canada who listen to the show, and apparently nothing is unifying Canadians more than in a long, long time than Trump's desires to make Canada the 51st state. And he's serious. So here it is from his Fox News Super Bowl interview.
You know, the Prime Minister said this weekend to a group of Canadian businessmen, he was at a private meeting, he said that your wish for Canada to be the 51st state is a, quote, real thing. Is it a real thing?
Yeah, it is. I think Canada would be much better off being a 51st state because we lose $200 billion a year with Canada, and I'm not going to let that happen. It's too much. Why are we paying $200 billion a year essentially in subsidy to Canada? Now, if they're a 51st state, I don't mind doing it.
Well, okay. All right. I don't think Canada wants it. Why would Canada want it? You might want it. You're the only one who wants it. Canada does not want it. Canada's not interested. And here is the president's national security advisor, former Congressman Mike Waltz. He was on NBC's Meet the Press with Kirsten Welker, who asked him this.
Talk about Canada in a closed-door meeting with business leaders. Outgoing Prime Minister Justin Trudeau warned that President Trump is serious about annexing Canada to make it the 51st state. Is he right? Is President Trump serious about planning to annex Canada?
Look, I think the Canadian people many of them would love to join the United States with no tariffs, with lower taxes. And I have all kinds of neighbors down in Florida that are Canadians that are escaping many of the liberal policies and have moved in. But look, what we're talking about
yes or no? First of all, I think some Canadians would disagree with you.
In the Western Hemisphere?
I think some Canadians would disagree with you. But just yes or no, is he planning to annex
part
Canada?
Of his policy. Well, I don't think there's any plans to invade Canada, if that's what you're talking about. But there is a lot of people that like what we have in the United States and do not like the last 10 years of liberal progressive governance in Trudeau. But really what you're seeing is a reassertion of American leadership in the Western Hemisphere from the Arctic all the way down to the Panama Canal. And that's what we're talking about, from Greenland to Arctic security, to the Panama Canal coming back under the United States. America has avoided our own hemisphere where we have the energy, the food, and the critical minerals for way too long. And you're seeing a reassertion of President Trump's leadership.
Okay, well, at what point are they just going to straight up ask them what the opinion polling says about Canadian citizens' desire to become America? I mean, it's an absurd notion, and it's going to continue, I think, to unify Canadians against us and our leader. So there you have it. I'm sure we'll hear more about that, but until we actually invade, are you going to join the invasion of Canada? Who's going to join that? Who's going to be on board with that? I think I might join, but then just stay there and not fight. So I'll put on the uniform, then I'll go, and then I'll go hide somewhere in Toronto. How about it? Who's gonna join me? All right, I've got 3 clips of 3 U.S. senators for you now. Let's first start with, this is Senator Cory Booker. He was on CNN's State of the Union with Dana Bash.
Was laid out in Project 2025, which you and other Democrats repeatedly warned voters about. So why didn't you have a better plan?
Well, again, I think the plan right now is working in 4 parts. One is a legal strategy to stop him from violating the separation of powers, from violating our civil service laws, civil rights laws, and we're winning. We've seen 41 cases being taken, 12 of them, were successful in stopping some of his illegal actions. The next is a legislative and oversight effort to really try to expose it, not to treat this as Democrat versus Republican, right or left, but really right or wrong, and continue to try to use our positions procedurally as well as legislatively to stop what he's doing. And then finally, perhaps most importantly, because all of us have to have a role, from the media to everyday citizens, which is shining a light on the dark corners of what they're doing and how it is actually endangering Americans' lives, is threatening to raise the cost of people's everyday goods and inflation and more. We've been successful in the past, from turning up the heat on him to stopping him from tearing away health care in his first administration, to even when he did one of those awful illegal acts of trying to stop government funding of our first responders, our veterans, our meal programs. The outrage of Americans actually stopped them from what they were doing, and then our legal strategy further put a bar on their ability to stop sourcing and funding vital resources for communities.
All right, Senator Cory Booker on CNN State of the Union. And now here's Senator Chris Murphy, who has been a real superstar in the Democratic Party, going back and forth on Twitter with Elon Musk over the weekend, by the way. He was on ABC News this week with Martha Raddatz.
You have used incredibly strong language, a constitutional crisis, grossly unconstitutional, pretty alarming language.
Yeah, listen, I think this is the most serious constitutional crisis the country has faced. Certainly since Watergate, the president is attempting to seize control of power, and for corrupt purposes. The president wants to be able to decide how and where money is spent so that he can reward his political friends, he can punish his political enemies. That is the evisceration of democracy. You stand that next to the wholesale endorsement of political violence, with the pardons given to every single January 6th rioter, including the most violent, who beat police officers over the head with baseball bats. And you can see what he's trying to do here. He is trying to crush his opposition by making them afraid of losing federal funding, by making them afraid of physical violence. And so, yes, this is a red alert moment when this entire country has to understand that our democracy is at risk. And for what? The billionaire takeover of government. I'm sure we'll talk about this, but Elon Musk is inside our federal agencies.
But let me just say right now, they want to cut the federal budget. They would all disagree that it's corruption or anything else. They want to cut the federal budget and the workforce. Do you have issues with that?
Well, I don't, but there is no evidence that that is the goal. Ultimately, at USAID, They sent a whole bunch of people home who are still getting paid. And I think you have to ask, why are they doing this if it's not actually accruing any savings? And to me, again, the reason is that somebody like Elon Musk stands to gain from the closure of USAID. It makes America much less safe around the world, but it helps China. USAID is a thorn in the side of the Chinese government. Elon Musk has many major business interests at stake inside Beijing, and so making Beijing happy is going to accrue to the financial benefit of Elon Musk and many billionaires who outsource work to China.
Yes, that's right, Chris Murphy. I'm surprised he didn't simply say to her answer, which is not a great one. They say, like we should take them on good faith, that they just want to cut government. Do you have a problem with that? The answer is if they want to, they have to do that through congressional action. They have to vote on it. You don't just get to cut agencies, entire agencies. By the way, the backlash, the backfiring of this USAID policy is hitting hard and fast, including to Trump-supporting Americans. Here's one farmer who made a video exclaiming how terrible this is going to be for him and the contracts that he has as a farmer and a Trump voter, apparently.
I wanted to start off by saying I did vote for Donald Trump. We are possibly going to lose our farm if NRCS doesn't hold up their contract with us on the EQIP program. So the reason that they're not able to hold up the contract is our EQIP program, which is cost sharing on fences, waters, a well, and some seedings, was funded by the Inflation Reduction Act. Because of the executive orders, there's a pause or a freeze on the funding through the Inflation Reduction Act, and they're not able to pay out on the stuff that we completed or anything going forward. I'm not the only one this is affecting. So there are other farmers in the comments saying that they're in the same boat that I'm in because they signed these contracts, and the contracts, even like, so whenever I looked into the contract, I made sure that that funding was set aside. It wasn't funding that, oh, we hope it's there whenever it's done. I made sure that that funding was set aside so that way before I made these business decisions, I knew that funding was there per contract. So they're backing out on the contract because they don't have the funding. They can't release the funds.
Oh, wow. Well, maybe you should have voted for Donald Trump. That's going to hurt all of us now. We'll see what that effect has on American farmers who get huge contracts from USAID. So a lot of funding. It's going to be a big deal, I think. And I don't think they realize that and many other things. Give it time, and you're going to see, I think, a continued backlash. This is my guess. All right, here's Bill Gates on what it means to cut USAID. Of course, he has spent a lot of his life trying to save lives, mainly through vaccinations.
Scary transition state right now. You know, even if USAID is going to be slimmed down, it's a fantastic organization. These people agree to work in the field, and they need to be out there. The fact we stop mothers from giving their babies HIV, that has been so magnificent, and it's so tragic. If we stop that, the people in the field and the people at that headquarters are a necessary part of it.
All right, Bill Gates, there you go. One of the billionaires who has supported Donald Trump, at least rhetorically, or has been kind. We'll see if he continues to push back even louder than that. All right, now here is Senator Andy Kim of New Jersey. I mentioned I had 3 senators. Here's the other New Jersey Senator, Andy Kim, on Meet the Press with Kirsten Welker.
Her colleague Jeff Merkley basically said he's prepared to try to shut down the government over some of these sledgehammer actions that he's seeing by Elon Musk. Are you prepared to shut down the government, to join Democratic colleagues who want to stand in the way of keeping the government open?
Well, you have to look at what the Trump administration is doing right now. They are simply trying to dismantle the government. So yes, look, if we have to take steps to be able to hold them accountable, use the leverage that we have to force it, I cannot support efforts that will continue this lawlessness that we're seeing when it comes to this administration's actions. And for us to be able to support government funding in that way, only for them to turn it around to dismantle the government, that is not something that should be allowed.
So just to be clear, Senator, you are open to voting yes to shut down the government, to make this point.
This is on them. This is about whether or not they can get the votes. They are the majority. And if they cannot govern, then that's for the American people to see. But I've worked in government. I've worked through multiple government shutdowns. I would be the last person to want to get to that stage. But we are at a point where we are basically on the cusp of a constitutional crisis, seeing this administration taking steps that are so clearly illegal. And until we see a change in that behavior, we should not allow and condone that, nor should we assist in that.
Okay, well, will the government shut down in March as a result of all this? I'm guessing yes. What other levers do Democrats have? And now here is Kristi Noem. She was on CNN, State of the Union, and she's the head now. She's former governor of North Dakota. Is that right? And she is now the head of Department of Homeland Security. You've seen her cosplaying on the border, wearing a cowboy hat and with all of her plastic surgery on a horseback with a Fox News anchor. I saw that clip. Anyway, she was on CNN and she said government basically is terrible and the enemy. And Dana Bash had to remind her now again that she is the government.
I remember a time when Republicans were very careful about and worried about the government, particularly unelected people.
Well, we can't trust our government anymore.
Having access to personal data.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
You are the government.
Yes, that's what I'm saying, is that the American people now are saying that we have had our personal information shared and out there in the public.
Elon Musk has access to it.
Yeah, but Elon Musk is part of the administration that is helping us identify where we can find savings and what we can do. And he has gone through the processes to make sure that he has the authority
You're totally
the president has
comfortable
granted
with it.
him. I am today by the work that he's doing by identifying waste, fraud, and abuse. And his information that he has is looking at programs, not focusing on personal data and information.
Not focusing on it, but he has access to it.
We'll be continuing to talk to him about what all he has access to. But this audit needs to happen to make sure that we are going through a process that adds integrity back into these programs. And
Okay, Kristi Noem making an ass of herself as per usual. And now let's go to something a little bit better. This is Hollywood actor Richard Gere, who's also been a longtime activist. And he was given an award, a Lifetime Achievement Award at the Academy of Cinematographic Arts and Sciences in Spain at the Goya Awards this past Saturday night. And he warned of the slippery slope toward authoritarianism in the U.S. and elsewhere and urged the public to be vigilant. I like this from actor and activist Richard Gere.
I'm coming from a place now that we're in a very dark place in America where we have a bully and a thug who is the President of the United States. But it's not just in the U.S., it's everywhere. Everywhere. You know, I read a really moving letter in the New York Times from a gentleman in Hungary, and he was the slippery slope of how this happens everywhere. Authoritarianism takes us all over. We have to be vigilant, we have to be alert, we have to be energetic, we have to be brave, we have to be courageous. And everyone who's watching this in the Spanish-speaking world and elsewhere, we have to be willing to stand up, tell the truth, be honest, and that there's a place in all of our lives for basic kindness, for basic love and understanding, and an embrace of each other.
All right, there you go, Richard Gere in Spain over the weekend. That's all I've got for you in the clips, your headlines, your good stuff. Now it's time to get to my guest, which I promised you. I mean, it'd be weird if I didn't have the guest now. I don't know why I said promise you. Anyway, she is one of the top political satirists working today. She's the co-creator and former head writer of Comedy Central's The Daily Show. She co-founded Air America. She wrote an amazing book called Liz Free or Die, which is still very relevant. She's a prominent abortion rights activist. She's appeared on all the networks and one of the founders of Abortion Access Front, which is a team of comedians, writers, and producers that use humor to legitimize abortion and expose the extremist anti-choice forces working to destroy access to reproductive rights in all 50 states. Check out her podcast, Feminist Buzzkills. Support her on social media. All the links in the show notes. Always great to catch up with my old friend, Lizz Winstead. Let's do it. Lizz Winstead is back. Hello, Liz. Welcome back. Thank you very much for joining us.
Hi, dear. Thank you. It's really good to talk to you. I feel like I don't talk to you enough, and I feel like it's because I'm so buried in this work every day that sometimes I don't even have an hour to be like, oh, I need to reach out to my pals and get on their pods and have them on mine. And It's terrible. So I'm glad we're hooking up. Thank you for reaching out.
I will propose this off the air to you and your people, but I'll give you a fixed slot to have an appointment time so that we could just keep doing it every month or every 8 weeks, however frequency you think you could commit to. I'd have it in there and I'd be excited looking forward to that, and people would know when it was. We could go live. We could make a whole thing of it. So I would commit to whatever you wanted to do to get you on regularly, because I don't reach out to you as much because of the perception that you are how you are, in demand and very busy.
Okay, I love this plan.
Okay, so let's talk about all the things I want to ask you about. How are you doing? I look to you for guidance spiritually and emotionally a little bit. You're very vulnerable and honest about those things your whole life. So how are you coping?
I'm unclear because maybe not great. I would say it's one of those things where when you do abortion rights work, you know that no matter who's president, there's always going to be work because there's just always people out there who are trying to take away your rights when it comes to this kind of thing. And so that's a weird consistency of oppression that I can handle. Now it's so profoundly unstable, and the institutions that I guess we learned on January 6th that the institutions of law and order and what we thought that the right wing believed in, that they don't, but the amplification of that with putting Pete Hegseth in as running the Department of Defense. That's usually the crown jewel of any right wing organization, and to put somebody so profoundly unqualified there and profoundly unqualified everywhere, it feels like we see this drumbeat of Musk and Trump heading towards total destruction of institutions that actually function. And we see capitulation from people like, why would you take a job? Can you imagine, Pete, if you were a comedian, right? And so then you're on stage and somebody said, you no longer can be amplified and you can no longer be funny, but you have to get on stage every night and in front of people say things, and they will shit on you and throw things at you, and you don't get to do anything about fixing that. That's what Congress is doing, right? And so they've abdicated their power, and the only reason to run for those jobs is to have power. To just abdicate it is some fucking weird thing I don't understand. There's a lot of shit I don't understand.
What would you like to see? What would you like to see Democrats doing that you're not seeing? Say, I feel like AOC in the House is leading and doing everything they can, and I feel like Chris Murphy in the Senate does a really good job. I think they need to get rid of that Chuck Schumer. Everybody's right about him. Jon Stewart went off on the other night. What are we doing?
You're tweeting about pizza at the Super Bowl still, dude? Like what? Here's what I would like to see. I would like to see Democrats leaving Washington and going back to their state and doing the difficult town halls and inviting Trump supporters and ask them if this is what they voted for.
That's interesting. I like that. Yeah, I'd like to see that.
Because I think people understand. And just like when you have, and I'm not saying anything that people smarter than I have not said, but when you just look at USAID as a classic example of what's happening, a smart person running the Department of Defense, like somebody who was a seasoned veteran who knew, would say to the president, we absolutely can't cut this because our military, no matter how much money we put into it, does not have the capacity to handle every conflict with military strength, even if we wanted to. Like USAID is soft support and helps us create relationships and build relationships. Yep. And like the thing that I don't hear from the media enough about is Trump ran on being, there was no wars under me, which wasn't true, but I don't want to intervene anymore. I don't want to spend money on Ukraine and wars. And I don't think people understand that we are entering into a perpetual state of war between having countries will fall apart, and I don't know how they're going to resolve conflicts when it comes to just cutting soft aid, but also you've basically told the Middle East that you're going to colonize Gaza, And then you are cutting all of the experienced people from all of our different agencies who know how to monitor when attacks come in.
Yeah,
or
institutional knowledge is something that people don't really understand. How could you not understand the value of having experienced people working in many of these positions? It's a really important quality in anybody working in an agency like that. And but don't you think you're saying, you're pointing out contradictions, Liz. You're making points about the contradiction or they didn't vote for this or the hypocrisy. But don't you think that a lot of it is people voted for this guy to be the boss? People actually want a dictator-ish guy. They might not use that word, but they want someone who's going to come in and whatever he does is fine with me as long as he's in charge. Don't you think that's a kind of a part of the populism that somehow has become so pervasive in our society, or the electorate? People are okay with whatever he does, including invading Gaza and Greenland and colonizing Canada, apparently. The Canadians are pissed. They're unified, too.
Get him on record, then. You know what? Let's get the American people saying it, because also I think we need to have a reckoning about who we live amongst. Who do we live amongst, Pete? Because if we are going to constantly give people a pass and say they didn't know and they didn't blah, 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 and eggs and whatever the fuck, I want two things to happen. I want Democrats to ask people if this is what they voted for, and then I want people to respond, and then I want Democrats to act accordingly. Who didn't you really talk to? Other Democrats. I never understood why, if you're going to be silent on what's happening in Gaza and you feel like you can't, whatever your policy is, going on this sisterhood of the traveling pants with Liz Cheney and her warmongering doesn't make you look like you're the candidate of change. I think Kamala did most everything that anybody could do with 100 days correct. But I do think that there was these moments of just, did Trump's team do it better for the Trump people? And when you have Charlie Kirk, we talked about this, I think, last time I talked to you. When you have Charlie Kirk out there going to college campuses, getting apolitical people and convincing them that feminism and civil rights, because every time they say DEI, just please replace that with civil rights, because that's what we're talking about. We're not talking about anything other than we don't want people's civil rights to be honored.
Yeah, talk about it differently without using those words in terms of what's happening. When they say they're rolling back DEI initiatives or affirmative action, Supreme Court's ruling on that, or the EEOC, like, I hear what you're saying we should hear, and I think it's super important that we keep repeating this. They're trying to roll back what was achieved in the civil rights era of the mid-'60s and late 60s, and the Voting Rights Act, which they already gutted at the Supreme Court. And so it's just a continuance of trying to pull back protections specifically for black folks, but obviously for women. And there's been a lot of achievements made for the disabled community in this country. And so talk to me about how are you framing that? Isn't that where we're at?
When you talk about DEI, the number one recipient of DEI are white women. Black people are like eighth on the list. Veterans, disabled folks, indigenous people, like black folks are down the list. So that's something we need to talk about after that. And also it's really converging a whole bunch of stuff together, right? It's when they talk about merit-based things, it's just understanding that means that you have qualifications, but you won't be disqualified if you are black or indigenous or a woman or have a disability. And so when they're firing higher up people that aren't basically just straight white guys, that's when you know it's not about DEI, it's about they just are rolling back civil rights. Why would you roll back Martin Luther King Day? What does that have to do with anything, DEI-wise or anything else? Why would you not celebrate Black History Month or Women's History Month? Or why would you cancel programs or clubs within the military that are
What do you think the answer to that is?
I think the answer to that is we don't want people gathering and talking about whether or not they feel like they might be discriminated against because of their race or they've had to work harder. Here's the thing about patriarchy that always has killed me, Pete. And that is white dudes set up the system for themselves, right? Set up the system for themselves. If you're a white dude and you are not succeeding in the system that your people set up for you, that's about the system. We've had to jump through hoops to succeed in the system. And then the punishment is I was rewarded being not qualified when I had to do 9 times different things so that I could actually succeed in the system that was built.
Right.
Be mad at the system. Join us. We think it doesn't benefit everybody. But if you're mad because you don't want to do the work that your system requires of you, when I have to do 5 times more things to succeed in it, you're the mess. It feels like a you problem, not a me problem.
Speaking of patriarchy, we could pick out any number of these appointments that Trump has made. But this happened the first time around, too. He brought in a lot of people to work for him who had been credibly accused of or even convicted of some kind of assault against a woman. And we all know about Donald Trump and his history with women, Pete Hegseth, RFK Jr. There have been allegations against Matt Gaetz, but so many of these men. And my question to you is, what is that? I think it must do something. It must wear away at any number of kind of emotional protections that we've created for ourselves, at women especially, to think about where we're at and what we see as virtuous and what we see as sinful, or what's good, what's bad, moral qualities. Like, there used to be at least a pretend world where the men who got into all kinds of positions could not have these kinds of stains publicly on their record. And if you did, it would sink your candidacy for any number of appointments. We did live in that place for a pretty long time, and I think that's a far better place than this one. This feels like a real dangerous, literally, place to be for women in this administration in a lot of ways. But I just wonder how you see more and more of these men getting appointed and confirmed into positions of power.
And hearing the excuses made by these white Christian men.
Sure.
Saying we've all said things we didn't. We've all asked for forgiveness. We've all asked for the Lord forgave me. And here's the thing. We need to be looking at when somebody says, I've talked to my pastor and I've prayed on it and I've done this. Here's what I suggest to your listeners is the first thing you do is Google whoever they say. If they say, I've asked my pastor and I found my peace and I'm on a different path, Google that pastor. Pete Hegseth's pastor belongs to the version of Christianity that says there are biblical roles for men and women. There's no such thing as rape in a marriage, that if you disobey your husband, he has the right to punish you. And it's not him punishing you. He has to because it's the Lord's way.
That's tough.
So if that's what we're talking about, then they can get away with anything.
They've gotten away.
God told me that this is the way it's supposed to be. Yeah. And you as a woman, according to my church and the place that gave me my salvation, does not have the standing on this earth to bring charges against me, because by very nature of me asserting any kind of independence or asking for any kind of justice, that is not a thing I have in this world. Think about that. Because that's where we're at. It's not a conspiracy. It's like Pete Hegseth's church believes that. Many of these, Mike Johnson's church believes that. Yeah. So you run the litany of whose churches believe that.
They should all be asked.
I'm asking for it for defying the role that God put me on the earth for.
They should have been asked some of these questions in their confirmation hearings. But do you believe you belong to this religion? Do you believe blank? That would be a pretty good question for any one of these guys. But by the way,
especially Pete Hegseth, who specifically laid out, my pastor led me through this. Your pastor also believes this. Do you believe that? Is that part of your belief system? because it clearly is, because he so freely talked about how women are polluting the military and eroding readiness. Yeah. And so it's also whenever you say, if I get this job, I'm going to stop drinking. That's the first thing an alcoholic says right before they hit the,
right? Yeah.
Purchase button on their total wine order. So sorry, dude.
It wouldn't matter if he got caught drinking and did something stupid, because he would just ask for forgiveness the next day. He did, hey, I'm not perfect. I make mistakes. I ask for forgiveness. And now,
as long as you ask forgiveness from God, you can't just have a person like you or I who would do soul searching, go to therapy, try to figure shit out. If it didn't involve the Almighty or some Christian God giving you the forgiveness, fuck you. You're trash.
The other thing is just, you make the point about Pete Hegseth and others, how they defended, you were talking about how Republicans defended him as, who amongst us hasn't made mistakes? What's that guy, Mark Wayne? He was doing that.
No,
you know?
he was the worst.
Yeah.
And him, when you look at him talking about Matt Gaetz and then saying, I guess I'll vote for him.
He said horrible things about Matt Gaetz and then later said he would vote for him.
Yeah.
And the thing
I just find, and this is the part where I just can't wrap my head around it, right, is I can't believe I'm about to say this. Forget about the raping accusations and the drunkie accusations, right? What if a resume was just presented without a name on it, right? And that resume just came in and you had to base initial whether we're even going to talk to this guy based on their resume. You would weed out a lot of shit. Kristi Noem, you were the governor of this inexplicable state with no experience at all doing this.
Inexplicable state.
You are like, if Timu made people, it would be RFK, right? You're just like Kash Patel. I hate to say it, but the freak flag Pam Bondi does have experience, even though her belief system is garbage and she was trying to overthrow the election. She's
an election denier is all you need to say about her. That's it.
Yeah,
That's all you need
election
to know.
denier,
you can't
right?
You can't be the attorney general if you're an election denier. Sorry.
You shouldn't be, but at least her resume has attorney general of someplace else. To look at these people's resume and incompetence, and especially Grassley and Mitch McConnell and older people who've literally got diseases before there was like vaccinations or know better, who know that this shit you shouldn't fuck around with this shit. And how many times do women have to come forward? And going back, right? Whether it's Anita Hill or Christine Blasey Ford or a Kennedy cousin or a Kennedy niece, to say, these are the horrible experiences I've had with this person.
That's what I mean. Yeah.
And then just to have people go, so what?
That's what I'm saying. What that does to your soul is it corrodes my soul, and I'm a man. And I think,
that's the gaslight, right? Because it's when you are a person who comes forward, your life is inextricably fucked up. Every single one of those people had to move out of their houses for a while, had to do something else, with the exception of the Kennedys. But Christine Blasey Ford, remember, she and her family had to go someplace else.
Yeah.
Anita Hill, under attack. The many people who have come forward in a myriad of these cases, they have to go into hiding by simply saying, I don't want this to happen to somebody else. This is not a person that you want. And knowing how hard it is to come forward and then hoping maybe you'll be the one, it's obviously creating that chilling effect so people won't come forward, so we'll never know. And also that story of Tom Tillis, of Pete Hegseth's ex-sister-in-law, when she went to Tom Tillis.
Yeah, you're talking about, I didn't read the story. I saw the headline. There's reporting on why Tom Tillis changed his vote. He was holding out against Pete Hegseth, but something happened. Apparently, I don't know.
What I read was that he said to her, if you come forward and put your name to this, I will vote against Pete Hegseth. This is her version of the story. This was reported in the Wall Street Journal. He denies it. I'll throw that out. He said, I will vote against him and I'll help other people. I'll talk to other people for you. And so she did. And then he didn't.
He outed her connected or named the accusations that were before that.
No, she came forward. He didn't out her. She came to him and he said to her, if you will bring your name to this and not be in another anonymous source.
That's what I mean. He said go on the, she came to him privately, but she said in terms of publicly,
yes.
They can't, they were making the argument that these are all anonymous accusations until this is not an anonymous accusation. This is a person who would obviously has a lot to say here and should be heard. And then she said yes. And he said, oh, forget it. That's shocking. I'm shocked.
After she came out and did it, she put her name to it. That came out the night before the vote. Her name was on it, and it was Rachel Maddow had her accusations on, read them, and everybody reported on it. And then, I don't know. And Tom Tillis apparently is disputing that version of the story, but it was credible enough for the Wall Street Journal to post it or to print it. But who knows what media means anymore.
I'm going to ask you about that next. You mentioned Rachel Maddow. You mentioned Wall Street Journal. The legacy media is bent the knee in many ways to Trump. They have capitulated, and there is all kinds of capitulation. You were telling me before we hit record that when you were going to promote your annual show in Minneapolis after the election, all of a sudden you were not booked on any shows. So we're seeing it up and down, this capitulation, and I wonder how you know who's credible, who to trust when it comes to any kind of reporting, and what you think of the state of corporate media, legacy media, all of which you and I have navigated for years and years. We know the players, we know the practices, we know the moves, we know the finances, we know the good people, the bad people. What do you think of where we're at in terms of journalism and media you can rely upon?
It's a sorry state of affairs, right? It feels very unnerving. It feels like I trust ProPublica. I trust The Guardian. I trust various people who report on, I don't think Slate's going to back down. I feel like sometimes when I look at even like headlines, like yesterday, the New York Times was like, in a bold move, Trump claims he's going to go into Gaza, and people were like outraged. Bold move. And then they changed it to brazen. And it was just like, even brazen, I don't understand why. And I've never understood why. It's why we started the Daily Show, why they dance around. And I understand when you have to say reportedly or accused, right? But if Elon Musk is the keynote speaker over Zoom at a Nazi rally in Germany and supports them, he is a Nazi. He's a Nazi. He is now a Nazi. And why can't we start calling people what they are? Or just sugarcoating things or saying, I don't understand it. It gives people no hope. And I don't know, but I think it's really hard if you're just like, living in the world and doing your job. And do you know where to find good reporting? Do you know where to look for things? If you're somebody who browses the news, who are you browsing the news? Where do you look? You're going to go to a place that you've heard of.
Right.
Or you're going to go to a place that you're comfortable with. And it's now more than ever, it's so easy to just surround yourself with 4 or 5 different news sources that feed into your already set belief system that you're not going to get new information that's going to change.
All right. So my final question for you, Lizz Winstead, is, of course, the one that you work on, the issue you worked on for much of your life and career. I want to know how you would lay out the state of women's reproductive rights. Do you want to be more specific? The state of abortion access? What is the question and what is the answer?
I think that overall, it's very grim because when we go back to talking about the religious fundamentalism, it all ties together, right? If you're not supposed to be having sex, then all of it, birth control, IVF, all of it comes into play. We're heading towards and in a real disaster phase right now. We have physicians in states where abortion is legal being sued by Texas and Louisiana for providing care for people who live in their states.
So if someone comes from Louisiana to New York to get an abortion, Louisiana then sues New York.
Or if you are a doctor in New York and you have a telehealth visit with a patient who lives in Texas, you're not in Texas prescribing medicine or giving medicine. You're in New York. So if that person, and New York and has shield laws, and many states have these laws called shield laws that protect physicians from, you can do what's legal in that state. And so this is going to be the next Supreme Court case. So that's hunting down the mistrust of people who are having abortions because they're dying, or doing miscarriage management, being hunted down and criminalized. The 63% of all abortions in this country are performed by medication abortion, and the nature with which they are going to try to re-litigate medication abortion, which has had in its history, since it's come on the market, it was legal in Europe for 12 years, came to the market here in the United States, and it had 4 major studies before it got approved. And since then, in all these different testings, 100 different peer-reviewed studies proving how safe it is. And we watched Robert Kennedy say, I'm going to have to look into that because the president has asked me to. It feels really scary. That feels really scary, but I think educating people and getting people to defend abortion access, but they're going to empower these fake clinics, which you and I have talked about. There's religious-based clinics that sort of impersonate abortion clinics and lure people in with their graphics and their signage and their websites. And they don't provide abortion. They exist solely for the purpose of dissuading and entrapping young people who are looking for abortion care and talking them out of it. They're going to get a bunch more money. And the scariest thing about them is that they are going to become ground zero for the anti-abortion movement because they're going to be more beefed up and more emboldened with taxpayer dollars. And if you're a person who Googles, how do I get an abortion? They own SEO on the websites, on the internet. So a website might pop up. It will hide the fact that it doesn't provide. You make an appointment, you go in there. The first thing you do is what? Give all your information. Since they're not a real healthcare provider, guess what? Your information's not protected. They find out you're pregnant. They say, come back in 3 months and we'll check in on you again. If you decided you had an abortion, you were going to have an abortion and you go back for the checkup because they haven't really revealed that they're going to turn your data over to law enforcement, that could be a real thing. You had an abortion someplace. They're going to track you down, track down your data. Where did you have it? Prosecute you. Those are the roads that we're heading in. The state of Indiana the governor just signed an executive order to release the data and the information of people who've had abortions in Indiana because they have decided abortion's not healthcare.
Well, I was going to say, wouldn't that be against the law to release someone's medical records? But if they're not medical records, I got to learn more about that. That's crazy.
If they say abortion isn't healthcare, that gets them off the hook.
What would be the next, what are you looking out for in terms of Trump ran saying, and a lot of Republicans got around it saying, leave it up to the states. But everybody knew, and Project 2025 said something different. What happens what are you looking for to see some kind of national legislation? Or I guess he could just sign executive orders and they're the law now because he's the king. What are you worried about? What are you looking for? That would
two things. There's already Lauren Boebert and a couple of other people have already introduced a ban on medication abortion, which is a national abortion ban. The thing that I think everybody needs to be looking at when it comes to abortion policy is how powerful the Department of Health and Human Services is when it comes to, you don't have to go through the legislature to create an abortion ban. If Bobby Kennedy decides he's going to get different facts, he could say the approval of medication abortion is junk science and we're going to now make it illegal. They could enforce this 1873 law called the Comstock Act, which would make it illegal to send abortion medication through the mail or through FedEx. So those are the things that are troubling to me, is how Trump can use the executive branch and the Department of Health and Human Services to kill all of that funding or kill all of that research and take it off the market. So those are some things I would watch for. Also watch for states who, when you say go back to the states, already Colorado and Missouri and Kansas, even though they passed ballot initiatives sent to the people, overwhelmingly voted on by the people, they're just trying to pass laws anyway to say, fuck you. We don't care. So what are laws? I think that's where we're at, right? That's the world we live in. What are laws? What are rules? What is prosecution? What can I do as a citizen to protect myself? And anybody who says they know the answer to that right now, I feel like isn't telling the truth.
Right.
Because it doesn't feel like laws apply at all.
That's the big question, what you just asked right here at the end. And I think we're going to find out within days, within weeks. I want to see you when you come back, if that's still allowed. Hopefully we'll be able to get together, and I would like to continue having these regular conversations. I always want to get your thoughts on everything, and I appreciate you letting me do that today.
I love talking to you too. And here's my advice to people. In this chaos that feels completely like chaos, the one thing you can do to make yourself feel better is my organization, Abortion Access Front, and several organizations who are working on immigrant rights or working directly with people. They have a lot of programs where you can put your heart into helping people. And whether that is, like for us, making care packages for people who had abortions and putting a little note in there and assembling them, getting together with your friends to do that. So you're putting your heart into somebody who's going through that. A lot of churches are sponsoring like meal drives. If you can make something for people who are maybe seeking asylum inside churches, creating a meal and bringing that. And those things really help. And, marching and all of that stuff is also super important. I'm not going to say it's not, but it's not getting you in touch with your humanity. It's getting you in touch with your rage, and you need to do both of those things. So be in touch with your rage. Your rage is important, but being in touch with your humanity and the humanity of the people who are most affected is also important, and you should do both of those things. And I guarantee you'll feel better when you take in so much information.
That's great. That is great advice and a great way to wrap up our conversation. I cannot top it. Thank you so much, Liz.
Mwah.
And there you have it, Lizz Winstead. Go listen to the podcast, Feminist Buzzkills Live. Go support her on social media. Send your money to her organization to support women and abortion access. And that is what I have for you on today's episode of Stand Up. I hope you appreciate it, and I'm grateful that you listened and that you're supporting the show and that you are my friend. If you're my friend, I appreciate that as well. Okay, that's it. That's all I've got for you. Please write a rating, review. Please follow me on social media at all the platforms, and please support John Carroll, who writes and performs the music for this show, johncarroll.org. Be the change you want to see in the world. Kickoff Monday. Real good. Don't listen to the wrong wolf in your head. And that's what I've got for you, you bumblebees here at the end. I'll talk to you tomorrow or maybe tonight at our hangout.
I think you're driving wheels with leaking grease. Boy, you better stand up.